Thank you. Welcome to this meeting of the Scrutiny Management Board. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and also making a recording. The recording will be available via the Council's website shortly after the meeting has concluded. There's some stuff about other attendees. We don't have anyone in person. To ensure recording quality is maintained, could members speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum and ensure mobile phones and other devices are turned off, including and perhaps especially the pinging noise of emails coming into your computers. We don't have any members of the board joining us remotely. We have a large number of attendees present. I'm going to ask people to remember the first time they speak, please just introduce yourself. Sadly, Councillor Crockett cannot be with us because she is usually very good at reminding everybody to do that, so we'll have to actually remember it ourselves at this meeting. Do we have apologies for absence?
Yes. We've received apologies from Councillor Pauline Crockett, Councillor Graham Biggs, Councillor Harry Bramer, Councillor Jonathan Lester, Tina Russell, the Corporate Director of Children and Young People, and Hilary Hall, Corporate Director of Community Wellbeing, and Jenny Bartlett, Councillor Jenny Bartlett.
Okay, any further apologies? Do we have any substitutes?
Yes, Councillor David Hitchener will be substituting for Councillor Pauline Crockett. Rachel Gillett, Service Director, Safeguarding and Family Support, will be substituting for Tina Russell, and Hayley Doyle, Service Director, All Age Commissioning, will be substituting for Hilary Hall.
Welcome everyone. It's also an opportunity to welcome Councillor David Davis, who is joining this committee. He's attended here before, but he's now a full member. Do any members of the committee have any declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda? Okay, I would like to approve and sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of December. I don't think we've heard of any requests for corrections. Can members of the board who were present please vote to approve the minutes of the meeting as a correct record? Okay. Have we received any written questions from members of the public?
2 questions were submitted by members of the public and were published along with responses as a supplement to the agenda on the Herefordshire Council website.
Are there any supplementary questions?
There's been 1 supplementary question. I'll display it now and read it out. Excuse me. Might be a moment. This question is from Mr. Declan Hill of Hereford. Can I therefore ask, with the definitions provided in the response, how many dwellings which are unoccupied but substantially finished, second homes, and empty dwellings, unoccupied and substantially unfinished, there currently are in Herefordshire with your most recent records?
And I understand. Do we have an answer? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Hill, for your supplementary. I can confirm that as of the 7th of October 2024, the following number of homes were classed as second homes. Band A's 175, Band B's 150, Band C 167, Band D 196, Band E 145, Band F 84, Band G 65, and Band H 8, giving us a total of 990. And the number of homes classed as empty homes on the 7th of October 2024 were Band A 370, Band B 363, Band C 229, Band D 196, Band E 114, Band F 55, Band G 42, and finally Band H3, giving us a total of 1,372 houses which are classed as empty homes.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all of those questions. Have we received any questions from members of the council?
No questions received.
Okay, then we will move to item 7, which is the draft revenue budget. Just for information, we will take this. We'll look at income as a whole. Then we'll go through each of the 4 directorates, starting with community wellbeing, then children's, then E&E, and then corporate, and then look at MTFS and a wrap up on revenue. The committee is keen to explore the key decisions that the Cabinet has made in setting the budget, and we have quite a lot of ground to cover, so if necessary I might move things along. I'm sure S&B members will be pithy in asking their questions, and I encourage the Cabinet and officers to be pithy in their responses. The committee is well prepared for this, but if Councillor Stoddart would like to say a few words setting out the context, that would be appropriate.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be as pithy as I can. Going back to November the 18th, 2024, we had set, based on our MTFS, we had set a budget which effectively was £234 million. We had an unfunded element of £2 million, and that was based on a council tax increase of 3.99%. On the 28th of November, we then got confirmation from central government that the rural support grants were going to disappear and they were going to be incorporated, both the rural service delivery grant and the services grant were going to be incorporated inside 3 new grants, which were going to be called the Recovery Fund, the Social Care Grant, and the Children's Services Profession Grant. On the 18th of December, we then were given our provisional settlement, which showed that we had therefore lost the total of £7.1 million, which is our rural support grant together with the delivery grant, and we had received a repayment fund of 369k for the Children's Social Care Prevention Grant, which left us with a total deficit of £6.766 million. Once we then looked at the provisional settlement, we realised there were a couple of extra elements that we'd been given, which took us up a little bit further. And then we then realised that outside of the central core funding we had, we also then were given a new external, just get the title, extended producer responsibility, which is primarily designed, it's a £1.1 billion fund from central government, which is derived from producers of packaging. So effectively it would have come to us to be used for recycling, etc. However, there is latitude in what we can do with it. Because of the gap that we had in our their budget, we therefore chose to bring that inside our core funding to actually reduce our balance on our budget. That then left us then with approximately 2.4 million, I think it was. What we then did was we then went back to the directorates, the heads of the directorates, to look how not to make a saving, but to scale back the ambitious programme of growth that we had with them. That removed £1.4 million. We then looked at another area where we looked at £1.2 million of the Hereford Enterprise Zone business rates. So we brought that inside, and that effectively has enabled us, as I declared yesterday, to deliver a deliverable balanced budget. Is that pithy enough?
That wasn't too bad. Let's follow that. Does anybody want to kick off questioning on income? If not, I will ask, obviously given the situation you just described, fees and charges are an area to look for. So what has the Cabinet done to assure itself that we are collecting as much as we can from fees and charges and also from other income that services can generate?
Chair, would you like me just to define what we've then got as income, where our income has come from? Is that easy?
If you can do it pithily, yes.
Very pithily. So effectively what we therefore have is our income comes from a number of areas. I'll just flick to find my piece which tells me where it is. It's £146 million from council tax, which is about 63% of our income, if I remember. We then get 40 so million pounds from business rates, and then we then get about 29 million from central government, which is about 16%. So effectively, locally raised taxes here in Herefordshire are approximately 83.9%, and 16% is come from central government grants.
What have you done around service specific income, so fees and charges, and then also commercial income that services could be generating?
Through you, Chair, if I can provide some information. So as part of our routine internal budget monitoring and the quarterly monitoring reports that go to Cabinet, we examine all of the different elements of the budget across income and expenditure, and we report any variance above 250k. Internally, we review any variances to understand the drivers behind those. So as part of the budget setting for 25-26, we've considered that delivery in year. We've considered our ability to raise fees and charges within our statutory requirements, etc. And that has informed budget setting for 25-26. Separately, in the budget report, we also highlight that we have undertaken an internal audit review of one of those particular areas where we highlighted that income target in year was not being met and hadn't been met for a number of years, and that's around the planning income target. And so a review of that was undertaken in year with a mind to set a realistic 526, and this budget reflects that reduction in the income target, but that's based on our internal work and that advice from our internal auditors and benchmarking across services. We've provided some additional information about the uplifts in those fees and charges in the year, and obviously in terms of income there are two levers that can be pulled to raise income.
Rachel, paragraph 68 says this review, the internal review, determined that actual income generated by the council is comparable to similar authorities and the current income budget is not achievable. I think from what I was going to ask is some explanation of that, because that sort of phrase kind of sticks out to me as being an area of concern, and you just described work that has been done. Is it possible to amend the report so it makes clear that this part of the budget which is not achievable is only one sort of element, or what else? Because otherwise it sounds as if the internal audit is saying you can't possibly achieve that, and you've obviously done some work around it, unless of course the word not should not be there. Thank you.
No, so paragraph 68 refers specifically to the development planning control income target for 24-25 and 25-26. So I will review the wording to make sure that it clarifies that it's the historic income target and the in-year income target that internal audit have considered is too high. But the budget that has been set for 25-26 at that reduced level will be in fact achievable and is considered realistic. So I'll revisit the wording in paragraph 67 and 68 to ensure that is clear and transparent in the report.
Councillor Stoddart, then Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I'd also like to mention that our external auditors confirmed that the budget that we'd set in for this current financial year, 24-25, was achievable, measurable and appropriate, and that's the measure that we've taken forward into this financial year as well.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering whether it would be possible to identify for members and for the public where in Appendix C the reduced planning income figure is actually represented in the cost centre tables for Economy and Environment Directorate.
Through you, Chair, it will be within the economy and growth subsection of the Economy and Environment Directorate. So that is on the page, it's the table at the bottom on the left.
I was comparing the figures in these tables with the ones that went through full council in February last year for this year's budget, and I realise these figures are sort of netted up at cost centre level, but the income figure in economy and growth last year was a target of roughly 6.4 million, and it's now 11.5 million. Obviously, there's, as you say, that £1 million reduction in the target for planning. What is the income growth in that cost centre?
I'm afraid I don't have that detail to hand right now, but we can provide that for you.
Thanks. It's quite a substantial income growth.
Yeah, we'll provide a breakdown of that movement between the 24-25 presentation and the 25-26.
Okay. Any further questions on income, or we'll move on? So thank you very much. We will move on to discuss first of all, the community wellbeing budget. So the budget, savings, anything like that. I know there are some questions here. Does Councillor Stark want to ask the first question?
Thank you, Chair. At the last SMB, I challenged the Cabinet over whether we're getting value for money for the 20% uplift in children's services, because I was concerned that we were seeing quite a large uplift there, which has obviously a big impact on the budget. And I also, in the same breath, said, I hope we weren't going to see a similar uplift in community wellbeing. Well, lo and behold, we now have a 20% uplift in community and wellbeing. I've tried to look at the figures, Councillor Stoddart, and I did ask at planning meetings whether we could get more detail on what's caused that 20% uplift. But could you explain why, after the question at the last SMB, we've had to come up with a budget where we've now raised the community wellbeing budget to a staggering almost 40% of the overall revenue budget?
Thank you, Councillor Stark. What I'll do is I'll refer across to my colleague, Councillor Gandy, and ask her to address that.
Thank you. I think it's probably, I understand your question, Councillor Stoddard, but I think you probably already know the answer. The figures, the demand for adult social care has increased across the country exponentially, and I suspect will continue to do so. And the figures that I have got before me, which is only a snapshot of some of the areas, show that the increase in domiciliary care between 2023 and 2024 was a 23% increase, and the increase in respite residential care was a 50% increase. And there are a number of other areas where we have had significant increases. We are facing a situation, whether we like it or not, where the number of elderly people in Herefordshire is growing at an enormous rate. Any of us in the room who are of an older disposition will know that following the Second World War, there was a real significant increase in the number of children being born. It was probably what was classed as the first baby boom. Those people are now in their 80s. And so we are having to deal with the impact upon that situation. And in 30 years' time, we will probably be doing it again with the children of those adults. On top of that, we have a situation where you are right, there was an increase in children's social care, and those children not all, but many, who are in children's social care for a significant number of years, then go into adult social care, and they're in adult social care possibly for another 60 years, and we have to look after them. We do have plans to reduce the front door demand, and I will pass over to my colleagues who will give you some examples of what we're trying to do. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Zakia Lockhead. I'm Service Director for Adult Social Care and Housing. So our services are looking at making sure we have a more robust frontline offer to people, make sure that people are able to get self-help and be able to access services much sooner in terms of our prevention approach. We're making sure that they're able to access resources within the community when they need them at the right time, rather than waiting until they get into crisis. But also working with understanding our carer population so we can make sure our offer to carers is robust and strong from the onset, and that they're able to get in touch with the relevant services within the communities as quickly as possible. We're also wanting to improve our tech offer in terms of the technology that people can access within their homes and any minor aids and adaptations as well. Because what we found is that if people seek help as early as they can and reduce the social isolation and any deterioration in their needs, then we can actually get to them sooner and delay the demand for some of our more acuity and higher needs kind of population that we're seeing coming through the door currently. And then we're also making sure that we engage with our communities in terms of our voluntary and charitable organisations as well, so that we can align our work with them and make sure that they are offering robust services and advice to people as they need them. Yeah.
So, Councillor Stark, then. Oh, okay. Let's hear from the.
Hi, Hayley. I'm the Service Director for All Age Commissioning. So just the other element that is adding to the budget pressure is the cost of our care services. And so you'll know that we've had the ongoing cost of living increases that also impacts our providers in terms of their ability to provide their services. So things like utilities, cost of food, etc., all impacts on our providers as well in terms of particularly our residential markets. But then the recent announcements around the national increase in national insurance contributions and the increase in living wage, etc., they all have a knock-on effect to the cost of care that we deliver. So that is an impact on the budget as well. We continue to work with our providers across all sectors in the adult social care market, and we are looking at how we commission with providers. So we have a number of provider forums to look at the challenges. We consult with them on their fees and try to negotiate the value for money for the council, and are undertaking a number of contract reviews to make sure we are getting that value for money for the council. But it is a factor in terms of the cost of care delivery.
Hang on. Councillor Stoddart is keen to chip in as well, and we'll come back to you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Hayley, and your team. What I would, in response to Councillor Stark's point, so the uplift in community wellbeing is £15.273 million. Of that, the growth in demand is about 40%, so it's £6.863 million. Carol and others have explained to you what that growth and the demand has come from, but that also in there we factored in the uplift in the national minimum living wage, and also the indirect earning increase that will come to us from our care providers. We've also then got, as part of the uplift to the community wellbeing, the pay award, and the pay award represents an estimate of what we believe that will be based on our staffing expenditure in community wellbeing for this year. It also includes 448k for the direct national insurance uplift that we'll see. We expect that to be funded by central government, but we wait to see if that will come through on the final settlement at the end of the month. And then lastly, in inflation, we've also then got the figure of just £7.361 million, which represents what we believe the impact of inflation across the directorate, and that we fund, as we always have done, at 90%. So that's why, although the headline figure is 15.273, the direct bit to growth is 40%, which, as we say, also includes those indirect earning and minimum living wage costs. Thank you.
I need to come back because sustainability is a key issue, I think, for the board. We've seen that Children's Services at least is trying to pay back some of the 20% uplift over the next few years, because we know that we can't sustain a budget level for Children's Services at that sort of level and not have an impact on other services. What I don't see in this budget, Councillor Stoddart, is any equivalent for community wellbeing. We've got this base budget of 92 million. I'm trying to see where in the MTFS we have any tailing off of that 92 million back down again, given what one of our colleagues has said about trying to reduce the front door demand, but I can't really see it in the figures. It concerns me that if the budget level stays at 92 million, and after what Councillor Gandhi has said, may even have to increase again next year, while we may be in a healthy position at the moment, these are very strong headwinds that we're facing, and I can't see where that discussion is in the papers at the moment, and that's one of the concerns I've got, that just looking at 25-26 budget as a whole doesn't really explain all the risk and all the problems coming down the line. So what are you doing as Cabinet to try and see what you can do with community wellbeing to try and get some of that uplift paid back, as we did with Children's Services, and I continue to do so?
Thank you, Councillor. Well, clearly it's a it's a statutory requirement that we have to meet, and much as it may pain a lot of the residents of Herefordshire, 65% of our budget is non-discretionary. It's statutory in children and young people and adult social care. That's the reality. What we therefore do is we look to take all steps we can to minimise demand. However, where do we go to? Do we say no to everything? There are things we have to do. What steps we do take place are we have in place the same economic controls that we had for the last year, and this financial year will carry into next year. So any expenditure above £500 has to be signed off by directors, and so on and so forth. We're also doing a lot, and perhaps my colleague Rosie on my left may be able to say more on our on how we're actually going out to market. We're trying to get better at that. So we're using all those measures, but actually, how do we do demand? We can manage expectations as best we can, but certainly the demand is coming because people are getting older. Other things that we have done is in this year's budget, in the 25-26 budget, we have, as you know, in November last year, we've moved £11 million into a contingency element to enable demand-led services. If they then overspend in that year, we can reach into those pots to assist them for unplanned expenditure. Because as you know, we can plan in both children and adults as best we can. As you can see, it's a very tightly controlled budget. But if something happens untoward on demand, then we have now funds available to assist them with.
I can't see why, since we did it for Children's Services, which again is a statutory-driven service, why we can't be looking at some sort of, if not an improvement plan, some sort of plan to try and drive down those pressures that we have had to fund this year. Because we've managed to do it in Children's Services, I don't see why we shouldn't be thinking about doing a parallel exercise, Councillor Stoddart, for community wellbeing, including adult social care.
A perfect question for Councillor Gandhi, who wants to come in anyway.
But I think probably Rosie will probably answer that question better than me. I just wanted to remind members that in the previous financial year, we made a saving of £6 million, which we met in total. I believe that the the saving the year previous to that, when I was not a cabinet member, was also £6 million, and we do expect to make the savings this financial year that we've been required to make. So it's not as if we are literally sitting on our laurels and just allowing the money to just get away from us. We are doing everything we can to bring our budget into an acceptable figure. But so we have, in fact, saved probably, well, by the end of this financial year, we would have saved something like 19 to 20 million pounds in savings over 3 years. And I think that is something in a time when the demand for adult social care, and let's be clear about this, adult social care starts at a really young age and can go on until somebody is over 100 years of age. That is a long, long time. So it is very different to children's services. The problems are the same. The length of time that you have dealing with that individual problem is significantly longer. And so therefore the type of plan that children's services put in place is not necessarily the same sort of plan that we are putting in place for adults. But I'll pass on to Rosie.
Thank you all. So just to pick up on a couple of points raised by Councillor Stoddart, Councillor Gandy, there is something for us as an organisation as a whole in relation to the way in which we commission and we procure our services. I'm very aware that through the work that Hayley's team are doing in relation to all ages commissioning, there is a development strategy around the way in which we approach our adult social care market in response to the changing needs of our population who do require our services. A number of different things that we're looking at in that respect, particularly in relation to working age adults, really looking at modernising our models of care and support that deliver the best outcomes for people in a way that promotes independence and enablement, again reducing demand on the service in the long term, but also delivering best value for money for the council. Some of that is longer term in terms of strategic aim, and it will take us a while to build. We are largely commissioning quite traditional models of care in Herefordshire, and that's something that we are working really hard to move forwards at quite some pace. Go back to some comments that my colleague Zakia made as well at the start of our conversation in relation to community wellbeing and the focus of prevention and the work that the team is doing. Again, looking to work with our providers, work with our communities further upstream, again to really reduce and delay the needs of the adult population who do require our care and support, so that again we are promoting independence and enablement with supporting people in far more cost effective and different ways to that which we have previously, that again in time will show positive impact on the budget. And what Councillor Gandy is saying is right. The challenges are the same in relation to demand for social care. There's a lot more complexity that we're seeing in relation to the people that we're seeking to support, particularly in relation to dementia and particularly in relation to working age adults with complex and multiple disabilities. As a result, our markets are different. So the children's and adults markets are different, and the way in which we react and relate to our markets needs to be different as well. So we are actively working to develop that strategic commissioning strategy for adult social care, but as Councillor Stoddart mentioned, also more broadly across the organisation that can really support us to manage our third-party spend, not just now and in the immediate term, but also far further down the line as well. So I hope that helps to answer some of the question in relation to the work that the community wellbeing team are doing and we're doing as a corporate entity as well.
Just one final point.
I have a lot of people waiting, so very quick.
Are all these positive moves reflected in MTFS, Council Stoddart, or not at the moment?
Yeah, through you, Chair, I can take that. At present in the MTFS, and considering there is a significant amount of uncertainty around adult social care funding in that MTFS period, there aren't any planned savings or return of that in the MTFS as it stands today.
Thank you.
Okay, I have several people waiting. My feeling is this is obviously an important and an interesting area. I think perhaps SMB we might want to talk to Councillor Crockett about whether there's some joint value that Scrutiny can add to this area over the coming year, because it clearly is a significant budget pressure. Things are happening, but I feel like that it would be nice to have a bit more of a clear strategy of how those things will impact on the budget. But
Chair, we would welcome any input from Scrutiny on that.
Okay. Right, I have Councillor Harvey, then Councillor Thomas, then Councillor O'Driscoll, then I think we'll move on to children's. So Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions about Appendix C and the way in which the budget is broken down at cost centre level. And I'm looking at page 53. I think that this might be the Cabinet Agenda Pack, so apologies. But first page of Appendix C. The cost centre to do with, that's headed Director, has had quite a significant shift in the employee costs that are held at director level. Last year, it was over £5 million, and this for this year it's over £5 million, and the proposal for next year is that it's just under £1 million. I can see that the employee costs have kind of gone the other way in the adult social care and housing delivery cost centre. And I'm just wondering whether that's just a reflection of costs being accounted for in a different cost centre, or whether there's something more subtle going on there that it would be helpful for us to understand. Also, in the director cost centre, there really is quite a large level of income that is being recognised and held within that cost centre, rather than in the service delivery cost centres. Both the income below the gross budget line and also showing that the supplies and services line is going from just under 2 million last year to over 3 million planned as income for this year. So I think it would be helpful just to have a bit of explanation around that. And the third point I'd just like to highlight is I'm a little concerned to see that the communities cost centre is almost having its budget halved. Now, reflecting the work that has been going on for a number of years in terms of trying to manage the front door into social care services through Talk Community and other community-led initiatives. What that has done, partly, Vice Chair, is delay the point at which people enter the social care system by a variety of means, not just care in the home, but through enabling community-led action of various sorts out in our community. Of course, what that means as a consequence is that when people do come to the end of the time they can be cared for in their own homes or enabled by other means, they tend to come in with higher need and more complex care requirements than would otherwise be the case, which is again why we've got significant and difficult to manage pressures building in the adult social care and housing delivery area. But I'm just wondering whether we are making the right decision in reducing the budget for the community's activity and quite what that activity involves and why it's being reduced for the coming year.
If I answer that bit and leave Rachel to answer the more complicated bit. So Talk Community is now in public health, so it comes in the public health budget. And within communities, my understanding is that within there will be libraries. So it's not the community health and wellbeing total budget, if you like, also includes other things that do not include adult social care. So the libraries are in there, and things like the museum and the new library will be in going forward. So that's where the community side of this comes in. But the Talk Community, which you're absolutely right, is essential to everything we do. We try to do going forward to try to stop people going into adult social care. It is now coming out of the public health budget.
Yeah, thank you. I think what's coming out of this meeting is that there is a request for more information about the detail behind Appendix C, and really happy to share that. What those movements represent are the results of some restructures within the Directorate, and also, as Councillor Gandy referred to, the environments within that Directorate between budgets. So we can absolutely provide some more detail on that. I would say it's a real challenge with the information that we present as part of the budget in the amount of detail that is needed with the volume of cost centres, etc., within the council's budget. So we are always open to suggestions about how we might present that in a more transparent way, but we can absolutely provide that detail.
Okay. I'll just say that that feels like a very helpful contribution, and it may forestall some of the further things that Councillor Harvey wishes to explore. But please, Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to come back. I mean, really, my query was more about the rationale for holding a significant amount of income in the Director Cost Centre, and whether that income is independent of any of the other service-related cost centres that there are in the Directorate.
And we'll have to provide that breakdown. I don't have that level of detail in this meeting right now to be able to provide that response.
Okay. Councillor Thomas.
Listening to this last half an hour or so, I think most of you people on this side are working for the fire service. Back in the 80s, this council spent a lot of money on various living accommodation, sheltered accommodation, which unfortunately I think has become a slightly dirty word. That is, you're just literally fighting fires, aren't we? We're not doing anything about the future and to cut the costs. Most sheltered accommodation, one just outside my ward, one in my ward, there's 10 bungalows and a warden. The cost of that is a fraction of what it's costing to put them in old people's homes. Most people can live in sheltered accommodation for a minimum of 10 years from the time that they leave their home. 10 years, that is a huge amount of money you saved, and yet we're just pouring money into this problem, and yet we're doing virtually, from what I can see, very, very little about trying to solve the problem.
Councillor Driscoll, would your question, is it something completely different? Can I take your question as well before we...
Yeah, mine's a little bit more not specific, but possible. I wouldn't go that far. I would never go so far as to say it's helpful. Just looking at the increases overall, obviously one of the things we've touched on briefly is the fact that we're all having to factor in the national insurance increase and the new the minimum wage increase as well. Roughly, a rough calculation that I've done on here, that seems to be, with agency markup, effectively a total increase of approximately 9-10%. Could you confirm that's correct? But at the same time, could you also confirm that that's roughly the sort of increase we're looking at for agency staff, so that we're not paying? I want assurance that we're not paying over the odds. That's my question. Okay.
Who wants to go first?
Can I just ask you to clarify, you're asking about the increase that we've assumed in the budget on our agency spend?
Yeah, I mean, the pressures on the budget and the reason for the increase, one of the major reasons is obviously the increase in national insurance and the increase in minimum wage from next year. And if you factor in the fact that roughly agencies are going to charge 30% on top of that, I think as a rule of thumb, then I think the combined total, by my rough calculations, should be, with the markup, a rough increase on agency fees of around 10% on the current year. I just want the assurance that is that what you're anticipating? Is that what you're budgeting for, an increase in agency staff, or are we paying more than that in Herefordshire? Thank you.
So what we have included in the budget in terms of the direct impact of our of the known increase in threshold and rate of employers' national insurance, we've included 1.5 million on our own pay bill, except that that's not the question, but just wanted to clarify that. In terms of the expected impact on our providers, we, as part of budget setting, review each contract on a line-by-line basis. Some of the uplifts are contractual, and we work very much with the service and the negotiations that are taking place with providers to understand the impact and to include then a realistic and reasonable estimate of what that impact might be. But some of those conversations are ongoing and we do not yet know, and suppliers themselves cannot quantify exactly what their impact will be next year. It's likely that some providers will transform and review their business models to understand how they might absorb that impact as part of their normal business operations. So what we've set is a reasonable budget to estimate the impact of that on our providers, and that's through collaboration between finance and those contract managers within each service.
And you've estimated a percentage of increase for those providers?
So it's on a contract by contract basis.
No, but for the overall budget, obviously we can have to. There's a figure that we're looking at.
Yeah,
that's why it's gone up by X%.
And because those conversations are still ongoing, that's not a percentage that we would.
Okay, if you're saying that's commercially sensitive, I completely understand. Thank you.
I have Councillor Gandy and Councillor Gandy first, then Councillor Stoddart.
So, in response to Councillor Thomas's comments, it's absolutely not the case that the vast majority of our residents that we work with go into care homes, and I would hope that nobody in this building or elsewhere would accept that. So I can assure you that in 2024, 1,173 of our residents received domiciliary care. And for those who do not know what that is care within their own home. And that compares with 69 people who had extra care housing and 434 people who went into permanent nursing homes, which was less than the previous year, and 771 who went into permanent residential care, which was less than 2023. And on top of that, we also run supported accommodation where people live in, as you talked about, properties in little cul-de-sacs where they've got support if they need it. We also have what we call a shared lives scheme, which we would be really pleased if more and more people came forward to offer their services to work and have people living with them who've got relatively minor learning disabilities. I've visited a number of shared lives schemes and they are really, really good. So I think it is absolutely wrong to suggest for 1 minute that as an authority, our answer to people becoming elderly and no longer able to completely live independently is to tell them to go into residential care. We do not do that. That will be our last resort. Our first resort is to give them the equipment and the adaptations which will enable them to live an independent life, which is what we all want to do. And then our second would be to offer them domiciliary care. So I think it's extremely wrong and probably outdated and possibly shows a lack of knowledge of our directorate to make the claim that we deal with these people by putting them into residential care.
Okay, and the final word on this budget area will be Councillor Stoddart.
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, I'd like to refer you back to the council plan, where under the people piece we say we want to give young people the best start to life. We also wish to give everybody, including our elderly residents, the best we can as well. So part of that is that we respect the individuals. As a council, we respond to the emerging needs of our residents. We follow the national picture. And lastly, central government funding reform will help. As I've explained, 65% of our income is non-discretionary. It's statutory, you have to spend it. As part of the fair review plan going on in March, as part of that, looking at balancing up the the rurality of Herefordshire, we'll also be looking to ensure that we can get a better multi-year settlement for the next calendar year. But to carry on with Councillor Gandhi's points, that your perception, I'm afraid, Councillor Thomas, is incorrect.
Okay, thank
I
you.
think, Mr. Chairman, your perception of what I said is actually incorrect. As I say, it is far cheaper when it comes to moving people out of their home. I fully accept what Councillor Gandhi is saying, and we're very good at that. But there is a point where, in economic terms, it's far better that they go into a sheltered housing, because that will prevent them going into full-time care, which is very, very expensive.
Okay,
So I think
let us not have a back and forth. It might be an area that we want to put onto our work programme. I'd like to move on to the children's and young people's budget. The chair of the Children and Young People's Scrutiny Committee has a question.
Thank you. And it's good to see that from the Q2 budget report that there's a forecast balance position within Children's and Young People's Directorate. We've heard of some very positive moves over the past year. I think the question is really sort of how much confidence do we have that the 10.2 million savings plan over the 3 years can actually be delivered? That's the first question.
Rachel Gillett, Subs Director, Children's. I think you'll see from...
Can you pull your microphone a bit closer?
Yes, certainly. I think you can see from this year that we are now delivering exactly what we said we were going to deliver. We have delivered on the 3 high cost elements, which have taken a significant amount of work, but also we now have the foundation in which to build upon that. Although the forecast in 3 currently at the moment is also holding true, we have plans that are already in place to make changes to the locality model and to the workforce, and to bring in alternately qualified workers. We're very confident. What we've had to do is review the savings target by being realistic and looking to the future in year 3 and year 4, and that's currently still being reviewed. But we're very confident, and I think you can see from results from this year we're in the best place that we've been for a long time.
Thank you. So then the question moves on to the greatest area of risk, which is obviously the special educational needs transport. Transport efficiencies that I don't think we're going to be able to achieve this year. I realise that these are national issues, but in terms of Herefordshire, what are we doing specifically to address this?
There's a significant piece of work going on between economy and within schools and across children's to try and address this. As you quite rightly said, it's a national challenge across many, many local authorities. We are awaiting for some news from the DFE, and we're in close liaison with the DFE due to the challenges across nationally. It is a challenge, and with a higher rate of children with special educational needs, we're hoping to change some of the criteria, but more importantly, as you'll see in the capital grant, we're also opening a school locally in Ross for children with special educational needs. But it is something that still needs ongoing discussion and review nationally and locally.
Thank you. Chair, I would suggest that we have a recommendation that there is an action plan being developed, as far as I understand, and if we could have sight of that action plan with looking to include it on our work programme, which I know we've had initial discussions and it's still at quite early stages, but if we can include that so that we can keep an eye on that over the year. The other question I just wanted to ask while I've got the opportunity is about the possibilities of our own fleet. So I know that there is, within the capital budget, there is funds have been identified for our own fleet. I just wondered how, you know, have we allocated enough for that, and bearing in mind that it's not just about the transfer over from Balfour Beatty, but that also this incredible pressure from transporting children, which hopefully will be reduced given the actions that are being taken, but it's still going to be a pressure.
Just 1 second. So I'll come to Councillor Stoller just to say we don't need to make if we want to see a report or anything, we don't need to make a recommendation. We can just put that on our work programme. That's fine. Councillor Stoddart.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Fagan, so thank you for your question. But so an external review has been commissioned by the Chief Executive, and an action plan is currently being developed. And as the Chair said, you will see that and it will be shared with you. And that's looking at efficiencies across the transport routes. So as part of that, as you'll know, I'm sure will come up in the when we discuss the capital programme, there's £50,000 being assigned to buy new software, new optimised software to work out routes so we can get the most optimistic routes there. But at Cabinet, we were discussing with Councillor Powell and Tina and others from Children and Young People, how can we address SEND, which is a really challenging area. One of the things we've tried to do in this year's capital programme is look at things. Generally, capital projects have a negative impact on revenue. How can we deliver projects that have either a cost neutral or a negative impact on revenue? And this is one of those. So what we're looking to do is to buy a number of minibuses for up to £350,000 and run them to deliver and collect and deliver children as required around. That we hope and we believe quite confidently will have significant savings on our SEND budget. Is it anybody? Rachel, would you like to say any more on that?
Thank you. I believe Councillor Harvey has a question or two.
Yes, thank you. And if just clarifying that I understand the figures that we've got in the budget report for us. The 24-25 base budget that is stated for children's services in our papers is £58.5 million, whereas the budget for children's services that was approved for the 2024-25 financial year that we're in at the moment is 64.9. Now, looking at the detail of the cost centre figures in Appendix C, sorry for going into the detail, as I understand it, it is the difference in the base budget stated for these budget papers is because £5.5 million worth of cost has been moved from a transportation line under Education, Skills and Learning Cost Centre into the Economy and Environment Directorate for transport costs to be located all in one place. Is that correct?
Yes.
So any discussion of home to school transport and all the rest of it, we can deal with when we're talking about the Economy and Environment Directorate. So responsibility for that is being co-located in a single directorate.
Absolutely. And the presentation within the budget report, it includes home to school transport within that E&E analysis of directorate. And going forward, we will be presenting that performance against the approved budget for home to school transport. Whether we present that separately because it's a significant issue, but we'll consider whether we present it now under the E&E directorate performance in the quarterly monitoring.
Okay, well, as long as we don't lose it as a saving in this financial year, I'm not fussed where we report it. It's always been a little problematic having responsibility split in terms of these two directorates, although I would have hoped with a one council approach that we're told we've been operating for years, directorate boundaries shouldn't, in theory, be a problem.
Absolutely. So if I can just comment on the transparency of that saving. So any saving will continue to be reported on an individual basis, regardless of where it now sits within the directorate. But I can confirm that collaboration across the services does in fact take place. And this review now brings together that work across a variety of different teams, from finance, teams within the Children's Directorate, the transformation team, as well as the transport team within E&E.
I'm just going to, just a specific question. Who in the Cabinet is keeping an eye on this? Who is accountable for specifically this transport area?
It's Councillor Powell, as Children and Young People. He is the one that briefs us on those issues.
Thank you for that clarification, and I'll come back to some queries I've got on the transportation budget when we're looking at the correct directorate. I support and think it's a good idea that there's been a slight reprofiling of savings to be delivered by this directorate. I note that this is the only directorate that is targeted to deliver savings in the forthcoming financial year, and because we in the end had a budget amendment related to delivery of savings in this directorate, which seem to be far more on track this year than they have been in previous years, and hooray for that. I note that there are two major £1.5 million tranches of savings to do with both reduction in high cost placements and the changing of the staffing profile and staff numbers. Do we have savings delivery plans that are considered to be robust and achievable for both of these £1.5 million lines?
So I'm assuming you're referring to savings S1 and S2. So they have been captured. They've been done. The saving one that hasn't. Oh, those are the new ones. All right. Sorry, I'll refer back up to Rachel. Sorry.
Yes, so the plan is in place for both the change in workforce and in the reduction of placements. That plan isn't just a brand new plan, it is a plan that's been working well. We've seen the number of residential placements drop from 52 to 46, and now we're down to 36. We've seen the workforce change and the demographic of that workforce change, with 26 new workers in the last 10 months, 5 due to start. So that work is ongoing and is done across a number of areas, including HR and finance and others working together to make sure that we deliver on those savings.
Thank you. Would those savings delivery plans be able to be made available to the Children and Young People's Scrutiny Committee just for their information and assurance?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I have Councillor Stark wants to come in on this, and then I think that's it for children's.
This is a reference to Annex B of Annex A. I'm sorry, it's quite confusing. But Annex A is the medium-term financial strategy, and in Annex B, Councillor Stoddart and Councillor would be Powell, but we show the children's 3-year plan there of savings of 2.5 in 25/6, 3.9 in, no, 2.5 this year, 3.9 in 25/6, 2.2 in 26/7, and 1.4 in 27/8. At Cabinet yesterday, Councillor Stoddart, you made the point that you couldn't stick with a 3.99% base budget increase because of the loss of the rural grant, which I agree is quite a blow to us. But how much of a challenge did you make to this particular directorate? Because if you had managed to get around 1.3 to 1.4 million of those savings to stick in 25/6, you would have achieved your 3.99% base budget.
Thank you, Councillor Stark. Yes, I can argue that that could have been. However, you will recommend that this is this is the change from a 3 to a 4 year savings plan that Tina put forward to us. I think it was October that we then approved, because effectively Tina came in and explained to us that the previous plan she didn't have the confidence, and I think one of the members across the other side referred to confidence in delivery. And as Rachel said, we are confident in delivering this now, and therefore that's part of that we didn't have the confidence to deliver a 3 year, therefore we have much greater confidence in delivering that 4 year plan, which includes, as you can see there, the savings there.
Okay, thank you very much. We will move on to the Environment and Economy Directorate. Just for your information, we are moving slightly slower than I was hoping, but we're still okay. But maintain pith if we could. Does anybody have Councillor Harvey is first out of the gate?
Yay! Thank you. Back to my favourite annex, Appendix C, for this directorate. Now, first of all, back to the statement of the 24 base budget and the realignment of this. I think for clarity for members of the public and members, the restatement of the 24 base budget for this directorate. Am I correct in understanding that this includes some cost centres being moved from other places to be relocated here, and that's why we've got something like a £10 million uplift in what's being stated as this directorate's current year base budget?
That's right. It does include some new cost centres, and we can provide a detailed breakdown of that.
Yeah, I think it's more a case of making that clear in the narrative. It's there in the appendix, and for anybody who's conscientious in looking at the appendices that went to full council in February last year and comparing them to these, it is possible to find the new homes for them all. But I think actually stating up front, one of the reasons why the base budgets look different is because these cost centres have moved, is just helpful, I think, in helping people to, sort of understand the solid ground off which we're building this budget for next year. So that's helpful. And as far as the transport cost centre, which looks like a new one, is concerned, HTST, could you expand that acronym?
So that refers to home to school transport, but we will make sure that we are explicit about that in the papers that will be revised for the 23rd.
Brill. So if I understand the movements both within the directorate and between directorates, we've had something like 5.7 million move across from education, skills and learning in the children's directorate into this home to school transport and send cost centre. We've had an intra-cost centre, an intra-directorate movement from environment, highways and waste of about 5.3 million from last year into the home to school transport new cost centre. So between those two, that's about £11 million that's gone into that cost centre. The cost centre's got a gross budget of 14 million. Is that because there is generally thought to be a pressure in this area, and it's on top of that 11 million, there's a further sort of £4 million worth of additional funding that's being provided into that service area for the coming year? Or is there money that's moved from somewhere else to sit in that cost centre as well?
this is proving to be a document that certainly requires additional detail. And again, I'll state that this is in summary form and it's in draft form. And we're always happy to provide that additional detail, but there are a number of different elements that make up this information. So we will take away some of these comments and consider how we present this in future budgets. So that transport budget does reflect the additional demand. We know that that's a cost pressure in 24-25, as we've seen through our budget monitoring. In terms of the makeup specifically, we'll have to provide some more detail of exactly what sits within that and how it, but I'm confident that it reflects the additional demand that we've seen in this year through that realignment into economy and environment.
Okay, thank you. Then the other question that I've got is about the Economy and Growth Cost Centre. That cost centre has had an uplift of £5 million in its services and supplies cost line. It was 0.9 million last year, and it's 5.9 million, all but a shaving, this year. And it's also had an increase from 6.4 million of income being recognised in that cost centre up to 11.5. And I'm just wondering if we could have just a tiny bit of context as to what that significant income uplift is that is expected in the coming year in that Economy and Growth Directorate, and what the supplies and services increase in cost is that's also being recognised there.
So I can confirm that the response to your first question around the supplies and services represents the 4.8 million in the UK SPF grant, and you might have to bear with me while I obtain the detail behind the part of your second question regarding the income.
Okay, I think you've said we've highlighted that this appendix could be some more context might be helpful in this when it goes back to Cabinet, perhaps, or certainly to Council. Councillor Harvey is reaching for her microphone. Do you have one more question?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I apologise for going into the detail and asking these questions about numbers and the changes between this year and those proposed for the coming year. But really, I think what I'm doing by using this questioning mechanism is really just seeking assurance that we understand what these cost centres are actually doing, where their roles might have changed slightly from one year to the next, and to receive the assurance that Scrutiny Management Board is responsible for obtaining, that we all understand what we're doing here and that this is deliverable, achievable and, reasonable. I don't intrinsically feel that there's a huge problem here, but I'm just wanting to make sure that for anybody out there who's wanting to try and follow this, and for members who are going to be required to make an informed decision in full council, that we've actually sort of gone on the journey and make sure that we've understood the steps along the way.
Okay, thank you. For me, it is Councillor Hitchinen's committee that is responsible for establishing assurance. It is our committee that is responsible for confirming that the Cabinet have a grip on what's going on. But I have several hands up, and I don't know who is first. Councillor Stark is next to me, so he can be next, and I have Councillor Driscoll. Anybody else here?
Thank you, Chair. In the past, I've complained about the reducing allocation of the revenue budget to economy and environment. I understand, Councillor Stoddart, the pressures that we have been facing in the two statutory areas, but we have seen a decline in the economy and environment share of the revenue budget. So at a strategic level, I do share Councillor Harvey's concerns here, because I cannot make head nor tail from these figures of what, if any, growth there has been in the economy and environment from last year's budget as it was constituted to what it is this year. if you look at Annex B again, the overall budget, the revenue budget, is increasing by just over 19 million. Most of that is taken up by community wellbeing. I haven't got any assurance that you as a cabinet have done anything to address my concerns to reverse the decline in economy environment's share of the budget. Because as I've said in the past, as others have repeated, this is the one area where our residents see the council at large in terms of the services that are delivered. Now, if anyone can tell me exactly what percentage growth there has been in economy environment this year, based on what it was last year in terms of how it was constituted, then I'd be glad to know. But it certainly can't be any more than 4 million, given the base budget increases. Thank you, Chair.
Can you tell us that, Councillor Stoddart?
I can. It is, as you said, an increase of 4 million, which is approximately 10% because it's gone up to £42.415 million. And in fact, I spoke with, before coming down here, I was sitting chatting to Ross this afternoon and actually explaining how pleased and proud we are that actually I can address you by looking in the eye and saying we have actually increased E&E rather than decrease it.
I'm delighted if that is the case.
Okay, let's move on quickly to Councillor O'Driscoll.
I think that's the most praise you're going to get from Councillor Stark on that particular issue.
Get us fair.
Absolutely, right. It's one of the things, it might seem, well, it's not small, but it's the £1 million or so in planning income. There was something that I didn't quite like. I wouldn't say I didn't like it, but the fact that there's historically underperformed. What do we mean by historically underperformed? Why has something historically underperformed within the budget? Why has it been allowed to go from one budget to the next without being addressed in the past? So, so if it was low last year, why was it set at the same level? How many years are we talking about historically as far as underperformance is concerned? I'm sorry, I haven't gone back and gone through all of it. But also, can you give me your assurance that there's nothing else that has historically underperformed or in areas in this budget that we should be aware of, that we should be conscious of, that that next year we will say this is historic, please? Thank you.
Thank you again, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Driscoll. Very valid point. So in the last 2 years we've been discussing with Councillor Singlehurst because we've had to make up that deficit of £1 million on the planning cost that we've estimated in. This year, what we've then said is, why are we, exactly your question, why are we doing that? Because historically, in the last 2 years, we haven't made that. Certainly in the last two that we were looking at. So therefore, and perhaps Councillor Swillinghurst can give you more details, but we're saying, why are we holding you to account for what is actually unachievable, and we don't know how you arrived at that figure going back in time. Therefore, what we've now done is, through the planning department, they have come up with an estimation validated through finance that this is an achievable figure. Hopefully, it will grow exponentially with the new software, and actually, we will then be delivering more. But what we're trying to do is to reset so it's an achievable budget based on realism, and I'm not aware of any other areas like that, but Rachel may have some points for you.
Please.
So to confirm that, and it's a really good challenge, as part of our budget monitoring, we identify any variance above 250k in the quarterly monitoring reports. We look at all variances on a cost centre level, and we've been explicit about that underachievement of planning income throughout our budget monitoring over the last couple of years. So in response to the question around are there any other areas of income that isn't meeting its targets, we've been explicit about that, and there aren't any areas that we've included in our budget monitoring reporting because they've hit that threshold of being above 250k from the budget that was set.
Councillor Fagan, and then Councillor Harvey has one more go, and then I think that will be it here.
Can I just come back? Just one thing. But why is it historic? Why was it allowed to go from year to year to year? And who was making that decision that it was okay for it to be left at that same level year on year? Surely, those red flags are there for a reason.
Yeah, as part of the budget setting process, where we are, or where a directorate is proposing to reduce an income target, one of the challenges that we pose is to make sure that it's not being put in the too hard box, that genuinely there's activity underway to consider how we might realise that income target. So within the planning area specifically, and Councillor Swinglehurst and Ross might have more information on this, but reform had been planned in terms of the planning regs and the activity that was assumed within that budget, the income budget, was a lot less than expected, and that's partly due to the Herefordshire County profile of what's coming through. So there is an intense challenge as part of that budget setting when we are proposing to reduce an income target to make sure that we're doing it for the right reasons. As part of that, we instructed internal audit to do that external review this year and to benchmark us with other comparable authorities to provide us with the assurance that it was reasonable to reduce that target. We similarly looked at our own performance over a number of years to understand the makeup of income that we receive in this area and the different planning applications that represents, so that we had that detailed understanding of what was possible and realistic for the 25-26 income target.
Thank you, but really it was hope over experience.
Councillor Fagan?
Yeah, thank you. My question is also around planning, and it's about the additional resources that will be required to amend the local plan to get it to Regulation 18. It's going to take a considerable effort. The demand from government is huge, and I'm just want to be clear that we've actually factored that into the revenue costs, and so that we actually are properly supporting our staff to be able to deliver that, so that we don't end up putting too much pressure on certain individuals who are then unable to actually meet that or get ill.
Yep, so we've, as part of that budget setting, we consider the impact of new regulations, etc., on the directorate budgets and resources required. So that has been considered as part of our budget.
And then the last question on this to Councillor Harvey.
Yes, thank you. Could you explain the rationale for moving the strategic assets cost centre back into the directorate, and give us some assurance that it's going to carry on its upward trajectory in terms of delivering a business-like approach to the management of publicly owned assets and the derivation of an income from that is commensurate with their value?
If I take the first part of that, and then I'll pass to Ross to talk about the activity plans. So following the departure of the Director of Resources and Assurance, a review of the areas of responsibility that sat within that role was carried out. The new post is a Director of Finance post that has more of a focus on the financial risks and areas of the council's corporate services, and so strategic assets was moved under the Economy and Environment Directorate as part of that review of that post.
Thank you, Chair, through you. And just to add to that, Councillor Harvey, I mean, members will be aware of the new structure I've put in place in the last 6 months. One of the key posts that I brought in to deliver on that is the Director of Commercial Services, and property and assets sit within that. So the sort of skill and capacity we brought in at a senior level is to ensure that we are managing our assets correctly, getting the most value from it in terms of our sort of revenue income, but also their sort of future value and sort of assets there. But also that role is looking at particularly around our commercial strategy. So how do we make the best use of our commercial estate, but also the other traded services and the income opportunities from that.
Okay, we'll move swiftly on to corporate services. I'll kick off with a question which is, Q2, we had £5 million of savings from transformation at risk. I assume the base budget is set on the assumption that those savings are delivered, will have been delivered. What contingency, what will happen if it turns out, because they are at risk, that they're not delivered?
So you're correct that at Q2 we have reported the savings that have been delivered, the savings that are in progress, and we've also highlighted the savings that are at risk. In those quarterly monitoring reports, we note that it's expected that those savings will be mitigated in year. That's the direction that has been given to the corporate directors to manage those within their budgets. We continue to work to ensure that we maximise delivery of savings in year. You're absolutely right that this budget assumes delivery in full of those savings. We'll continue to monitor. Q3 is an important stage in the financial year for assessing those savings that are at risk as well as the ones that are in progress. We've got 1 quarter left of this financial year, so it's really important that we continue to focus on delivery to ensure we maximise for the in-year performance. If those savings are not delivered in year, we will consider those as part of the overall outturn position when we close the year end on the 31st of March. Activity to deliver those savings sometimes is as a result of timing. The activity is underway, but the timing of realising the cash benefit of that is sometimes a little bit delayed, particularly in the area of transformation, where to ensure that we deliver sustainable transformation savings, that can sometimes take a little bit longer. But I'm sure Rosie might be able to add some context into those transformation savings in corporate services.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Chair. And that's absolutely right in terms of what Rachel's saying. So there's not much for me to add in relation to current savings delivery plans, the mitigations that we've got in place to deliver against those. But we are mindful that, as Rachel says, transformational savings sometimes take a while to flush through in terms of our accounts and where we see those. What we're also developing as part of our current savings programmes is the wider transformation strategy, as Chair we have spoken about, that we're keen to bring onto the Scrutiny work programme moving forward. That will then present wider opportunities for financial efficiencies, but also sustainable service improvements as well through the corporate transformation programme. That work is forming. We are keen to bring it to you. We're keen to get your insights in relation to that. Some of that will be in relation to services as we deliver them now, and some of that will be very much forward-looking in terms of how we want to move those forwards in the future, so that even from a customer perspective, those look better, those look improved, and as a result, we will generate some financial efficiency.
Thank you. I have Councillor Harvey, and so far nobody else indicating they want to speak, which is fine by me.
Thank you, Chair. Picking up on that point about transformation savings and in-year mitigation of failure to deliver as far as this year is concerned, how mitigations are affected in terms of making in-year savings to offset transformational savings which are supposed to be recurring, that don't get made as part of the transformational programme, are likely to be different and may not necessarily be recurring savings in the way that they are made in year. I was really surprised not to see any savings against the transformation theme of our council plan showing in the budget for the coming year and indeed future years beyond that, because I would have expected the transformational work, albeit taking longer to get up and get going, to be delivering the savings that were anticipated when the transformation initiative was set running. And if we're not recognising them in the way we're presenting the budget now, how are we expecting those savings to manifest themselves, and how are we going to recognise that that is or is not happening as this transformation programme proceeds?
I think it's important to remember that we had an incredibly challenging savings target last year of 19.5 million across the council, which included transformation not just in those central council-wide areas, but also within each directorate. And so we've delivered a significant amount of transformation savings, as well as transformation activity across the council in 24-25, and we continue to do that. The 25-26 budget doesn't specifically have any savings described as transformation. The savings in children and young people that we've included in the 25-26 budget do represent transformation in itself. It's transformation of the service. Some of the work that Rosie's doing at the moment to build on the in-year delivery of the transformation savings in 24-25 will flow through into the next year, and as those plans develop we'll be able to identify what of that transformational activity will deliver cash benefit and savings to the council. But I think it's important to recognise as well that transformation activity is also about making improvements to services, making best use of digital technology, making our customer journeys easier, and there isn't always a financial saving linked to those, but they still bring a lot of value to the work of the council and the impact on residents.
Yeah, I absolutely accept that, but I think it's really important for us and for the public for us to have some way of recognising that that's happening, whether or not that's translating into something that hits the bottom line, or whether it means that we continue to be able to offer services by delivering them in a new way or whatever. I think, our whole, as a council, our whole sort of digital strategy has been delayed in its development and implementation. And other councils, maybe to our benefit, are hacking their path through that particular jungle and maybe making it easier for us to have a risk-reduced way ahead, demonstrated by other councils having tried and tested ways of doing things. But I think it's really important that we articulate what we're doing in doing that, and that is visible to whatever bit of scrutiny is the right place for having that, whether or not it has a bottom line component to it.
Okay, Councillor Stoddart. Councillor O'Driscoll is waiting.
I just wanted to kind of, it's a supplement in addition to what Councillor Harvey was just saying. I completely agree, because the way I was looking at it as far as transformation is concerned is that even though costs are going up in the various departments, quite often the transformation means that costs aren't going up as much as they would otherwise. It's slowing things down, and I think it would be really, it would be really useful if there was a comparison as to what it would be, how much we would be spending without those transformation interventions, though I know that could be really difficult to provide.
Yeah, just pointing out, it is the fourth leg that you chose to put into the 4-year council plan, so we really ought to be having it stated somewhere overtly, and it being part of how we're doing what we're going to do.
I think that's clear. Councillor Stoddart.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Harvey. The area that we as a council were looking at in the last year has primarily been into the digital technology side. So as you're all aware, we did Simon distributed the new digital strategy. But it's the overall transformation piece. It's the where we are now, where are we going to, and the roadmap to take us there. That's the bit that we haven't had. And that's the bit that is now coming in place with the good lady on my left. And that's what will be presented to you all in the next short period, where we will now address that. And yes, we wanted to address it, Councillor Harvey, and that's why we put it in as the fourth leg of the council plan. We now have the resources that we're actually adequately addressing that. To address your other point about things like generative AI and other things, what we will not be doing is we do not want to be at the cutting edge of technology. That is not where we want to be. We will now be on the bow wave coming through behind, learning all the lessons of other early adopters in order that we can actually have more confidence in our delivery. And I'll pass across to Rosie.
Thank you, Councillor Stoddart. So, Councillor Harvey, great question. Councillor O'Driscoll, couldn't agree more, and this is exactly what I'm working on since coming into post, is bringing you a tangible transformation strategy with meaningful delivery plans that focus across each and every individual work stream that forms part of that Thrive programme, so that it makes the work of our teams tangible. in relation to how we're going to move the transformation forward. As part of that strategy, there will also be a financial improvement plan that will help us to ascertain those areas of strategic transformation, corporate transformation, that will support us financially, but also those that will support us to move forwards in relation to how it is we organise ourselves, how we deliver our services, how we transform our workforce to enable us to be a council that's more fit for the future as well. So it will be a multifaceted strategy that our residents, that anybody can see and feel, that we can discuss, we can bring to this work programme so that you can give us the test and challenge around it. I know a few of us have had conversations outside of meetings to say we're keen for this to come, we're impatient for this to come, and I understand and I feel that, and I look forward to presenting in a couple of weeks' time.
Okay, yes, we look forward to that as well. I think this might be a good point to take a break. By my clock, it is 24 minutes to. I'm loath to give us as long as 9 minutes, but that would make sense. So we'll be back at 1:45. Can you confirm when the Okay, welcome back. So it's nearly time. I propose to move on to the capital programme. We haven't touched on the MTFS. I would intend to come back to the MTFS at the end of having dealt with the capital programme. I know that's slightly odd way, but I think there are a lot of. I don't want to miss giving the capital programme enough time, so we will come back to the MTFS, assuming that everybody is sufficiently pithy. Do you want to say any words about the capital programme, or shall we dive straight in?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of words of effectively, our capital programme is very much aligned with the council plan. It delivers on a number of areas. As I said, there's 18 projects, which includes obviously at the bottom, £30 million for Southern Bypass Phase 1, but also starts at the top with to enhance our children friendly Herefordshire. So we've got the £1 million for the play area. We've got a number that we class of things that are normal day to day. So you've got the IT upgrades. We're supporting the public realm contract renewal next year. So effectively trying to put in place funding that officers and advisors will make it more palatable for localised, smaller Herefordshire-based contractors who may be more interested in bidding for that, with those two elements there. We then got the care homes and building improvement programme. We've got the Years of Brook programme tied in again to the whole concept that we want capital programmes that actually have a positive or cost neutral impact onto revenue. So this is, as we'll go through later and speak, this is an outstanding issue from some flood relief mitigation work we did a number of years ago. We want to remove that from an annual payment we have. The school planning software we've already talked about, that will pay significant benefits in Send. The resurfacing of Hereford Highways and the Hereford's infrastructure investment, that's very much aligned to what we found out on the doorstep in April, March and April of 2023. People want roads done, and I think you'll see that's the continuation of this year's programme into next year. But not only are we doing that, we're also looking at making the roads safer. So we're looking at to address the 3 black spots. CTV upgrades, Shah Hall refurbishment phase 2 is the conclusion of the funding for the complete finishing of the Shah Hall and the Library and Learning Centre. The school transport fleet, we'll talk I'm sure, but that's another relief into looking at Send. We've picked up from the flood summit, and we put in place just over £2 million to address that. So it's not just doing mapping and sort things, but we've actually got funding in place to actually make an impact onto flood mitigation across the county. And then lastly, we've got the bypass phase 1 with £30 million. So I think it's a very ambitious but exciting programme.
Okay, I think how we'll take this is we'll look at the programme overall and any questions we have on that. Then I imagine that Western Bypass Phase 1 on its own may have some questions around it, and then we will look at the rest of the capital programme. So first of all, I'll kick off the overall with the SMB has been encouraging the Cabinet to focus more on delivery of capital programmes, and I understand that we're on target at the moment maybe to deliver £80 million capital spend this year. You look concerned, but that's great. But the capital spend plan for next year is about twice what you're likely to spend this year, which is more than has been spent. So what gives you the confidence to imagine that we can double our expenditure in a year?
So as you recall, I think it was the last SMB, we talked about that we had been challenged to provide the figures to deliver projects quicker. I provided those figures, which in the previous years, in Q2, I think was £24 million off the top of my head, and we were delivering 50. So it's a greater than 50% increase, and I'll defer to Ross, but we're confident that that can carry on.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Stoddart. Through you, Chair. And again, just to repeat sort of my response to the previous questions earlier around the restructure that I've now put in place, bringing in the additional capacity, particularly at the service director level, focus on the infrastructure and growth delivery programme. Those posts are now filled and we've got the sort of capacity and the programme in place. We're already looking at the delivery programme for next year based on the budget being approved at Council in February, so that we are ready to go in terms of any procurement routes that we need to go down. So I'm fully confident that having put that restructure in place, we've got both the capacity and the skills to deliver on the new programme.
Any more questions on the overall? So I have Councillor Cornthwaite and then Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, less a question, more of a comment, and I want to read a very small passage of scripture, which hopefully you'll allow me to do, because I've been on the council for nearly 2 years and have not done it before. But while I was actually praying about this meeting this morning, I felt this passage of scripture did come to me. And it's from Luke 14, verse 28. He says, "For which of you desiring to build a tower does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, 'This man began to build and was not able to finish.'" The reason I read that passage of scripture is I'm just going to ask you as a team if you are confident that having set this aside, we have enough to finish the tasks that we've put before us.
Thank you, Councillor Cornthwaite. I can give you my categorical assurance that is correct. We have the funds available.
Thank you.
And picking up on Ross's point, the funds available and the team and the kit and the workforce to deliver it.
Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, well, I mean, thank you for those assurances. I'm not going to quote scripture on this occasion, but I will say my granny used to say, "Fine words butter no parsnips." And I think although we are seeing a, what is it, 157 million pound programme that you proposed at the budget last year has turned into an 82 million pound programme that you're hoping to actually deliver. So that's, what is it, that's 70 million pounds shy of what was originally being proposed. This time we've got a programme that's profiled saying you're going to deliver 134 million pounds in the coming financial year, whilst reverting project management back into the service areas. Now, I can recognise that there may be some cost savings in doing that, but historically, this council has not been great at delivering projects out of the service areas. People have been designated project manager for far too many projects to be able to genuinely project manage them. And it appears to have been more about spreading their costs to recover against projects, rather than actually giving our staff who are given those jobs doable jobs to do, which is obviously extremely stressful for the individuals, and it means that the work just doesn't get done. Now, 134 million pounds of programme delivery next year, when we are probably not going to, in the second half of this year, deliver on what we were forecasting at Q2, if our track record is anything to go by. This committee has repeatedly requested that we are a bit more realistic in the profiling of the delivery of our capital programme. Not to be less ambitious, but to recognise that we have to cut our cloth, and that sometimes, particularly because of economic circumstances, purchasing of materials, international sort of availability and that sort of thing. Things don't happen as fast as we would like them to, and that there is true realism built into the programme that we put forward so that we can deliver on what we say we're going to. Now, I would love that we delivered at the pace that this plan is proposing. And I hear what you say, Councillor Stoddart, and were I in your position, I'd be wanting to say the same words. But could I ask that you go away and you poke a really pointy stick at this one, and between now and when the programme comes to full council, you just take some soundings and take stock and see whether there is a more realistic profile that is going to help everybody succeed in achieving what we want to achieve with this, or whether you carry on going with what you've got here.
There's a fight to respond to that.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Mediocrity is something that I'd believe through my personal life not to achieve. Organisations that I've worked with have an unrelenting pursuit of excellence as a challenge, and therefore what I wish to do is set us challenging targets that should we be unable to achieve, we will then have actually justify why we've been able to achieve them because of what they're there. I'd much rather we set targets that are challenging for us as members, but also for officers and members of staff to deliver against, than set them a mediocre target that they then may achieve. I will then take it on the chin, and I'm sure you'll be quite happy to remind me of these words as we go forward. But Rachel will now answer a few words as well.
Thank you, Chair. So just to provide some assurance over the improvements in delivery of that capital spend in the year to date. So in 23-24, we spent a total of £47 million for the full year. In the year to date, so that's up to P9, we've spent just under £49 million already, and we're forecasting at present to spend £79 million in the financial year. So already those changes that we've referred to in terms of that change in Ross's structure, aligned, then that management focus aligned with support through the PMO, that's already providing significantly faster delivery of our capital programme this year than in previous years, recognising that we can still do more, and as Councillor Stoddart referred to, there are ambitions to continue to deliver at that pace through Ross's directorate next year.
Councillor O'Driscoll, I have Councillor Stark after
Thank you. I'm all for ambitious targets, but they should be smart, and the R in smart stands for realistic. They have to be realistic, because if they're not, then staff morale can be dramatically impacted. But I think we've all been full of praise for the way things have moved forward with capital projects, and especially within the Section 106 areas, and the way we brought in external project managers who've been doing a great job in I think we've mentioned this at previous meetings. I am still keenly aware that a lot of them, their contracts finish at the end of March. I know we're looking at bringing people in from outside. I am still concerned that with recruitment the way it is, there is going to be a lag between people's contracts ending at the end of March and people coming in-house, getting their feet under the desk, finding out how we work, getting to grips with the projects. All of a sudden, we could have 3 months, 4 months, 5 months of perhaps not meeting the sort of targets that we've been meeting over the last 12 months. Can you reassure me that the recruitment process is on track and that there will be a smooth transition between the external contractors who've been doing such a fabulous job and the new people that are coming in from coming in to take over in-house?
I will just say we're not supposed to be talking about specific projects at this time, but there will, as you've asked the question, we'll ask.
It directly relates to making sure we spend that money that's been allocated in the capital budget.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And a very quick answer is yes. I can assure you that. my control panel on Wednesday this week is considering a request to extend the current contracts to make sure that we've got that continuity, and then that will cover us in terms of the recruitment process as well.
Councillor Stark.
Yeah.
Anyone else on ready? If nobody else, we'll move on to the bypass next.
Thank you, Chair. In SMB previously, we've been interested in how we join up all the various plans that are produced across the council each year to try and get a more joined up view of what the impact of certain particular aspects of the budgetary and strategic planning will have on other aspects. Can I refer you to paragraph 7 of the overall report? There are 3 general areas there where you're hoping to achieve certain general aims from the capital programme. Mitigating key revenue budget pressures, which is good. Improve the use of technology, which we've heard from others on the SMB, that we're trying to get a view as to how we measure that and what the overall impact of it will be. And then deliver new infrastructure to support growth opportunities for housing and businesses. There's always been a difficulty in council to try and see whether those general aims have been achieved. You can look at individual budgets, you can look at the individual budget cases, and you can get some idea of what it may have done in a particular area. But I'd like to open up this debate and ask both Councillor Stoddart and the S151 officer, is there more could be done to read across from the capital programme to the eventual impact on the revenue budget to actually the eventual impact on the MTFS?
The short answer is yes. There is absolutely always more that we can do. In terms of addressing those revenue budget pressures, it's important to consider the whole of the capital programme as well as the additions for this year. So specifically in this year, we have we know that we've got a home to school transport review. We can see that through the budget monitoring in year. And so we are taking advantage of this opportunity to allocate new funding through the capital programme to support the outcomes of that review and enable us to buy the council fleet. Separately, within the existing capital programme, we have a number of areas that will also ease revenue budget pressures around temporary accommodation and sufficiency in children's placements, for example. So this year there has been a great focus on joining up the in-year budget monitoring and considering how we might use all of the council's resources across revenue and capital to alleviate those pressures. As part of our budget monitoring, we hold a monthly budget board with each directorate individually, and that encompasses a review of their in-year performance as well as consideration to the future. So we're not just reacting to in the moment, we're thinking ahead. And I think this capital budget demonstrates that focus and how we are getting better at that link. And certainly for future years, those ongoing budget boards will continue to have that focus so that we can get ahead and anticipate those revenue budget pressures and incorporate that as part of our planning all the way through the year to build up to each capital programme.
Would it help to have another view of the capital programme, which was actually focus in terms of those particular aims, rather than having it by just general area boards, to have a view of the capital programme that would actually allow us and other members to say, oh, here's that part of the capital programme and here's the overall aim we're hoping to get in terms of mitigating revenue pressures. And I just feel that the way it's cut at the moment, it doesn't really give you a chance to see whether those overall aims are actually being translated into reality.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
I accept that, and I think you can look at the capital programme through a number of different lenses. We can look at it through the lens of the council plan, we can look at it through the lens of the revenue budget pressures, and I think I'll take away and consider how we report that. And we've done a lot of work in the last couple of years in improving our internal revenue budget monitoring. The capital programme's incredibly complex and detailed, but we'll do some work in the coming year as part of planned changes in finance to improve the way that we report on the capital programme. So we'll consider how we might do that better through different lenses.
Councillor Stoddart.
Thank you, Chair. one of the things that we did through the late summer is we were looking what we'd be looking to add to our capital programme to deliver for the people of Herefordshire. What we looked at was we came up with a number of ideas, and then officers then enabled us to look at them through different prisms. So it's what is the impact of that on revenue? How do these then relate to the council plan? What is the impact on the rural communities and so on? So we looked at all these projects through a different number of lenses. And as we looked at them, we then were able to see and then score effectively how we wanted to take these forward. And that's where we've arrived with our 18 projects, some of which they have to be done. They're housekeeping, IT, building maintenance, and so on and so forth. So they were not optional, but we looked at some others. And a number were removed and a number stayed in.
Okay, Councillor Harvey has the last point here.
Right, okay. Gosh. Okay, well, I've got several comments. 260k planned for Yaser Brook. Flood alleviation schemes are hugely important and becoming even more so as we face increased rainfall, heavy rainfall events. But there's no point in investing in flood alleviation schemes if we don't then proactively maintain those schemes in our public realm contract. Now, the Yaser Brook, I understand, has not had that proactive maintenance. It's had a reactive approach to maintenance, which has allowed it to fall out of condition. If we are going to make yet more investment in Yaser Brook and in other flood alleviation schemes, we must join the dots and make sure that we then proactively maintain them in order for them to be functional as and when they're needed. 50k on school route planning software. My recollection is that the previous administration had route planning software for transport in its capital programme, and that officers bought up-to-date route planning software not very long ago to do exactly this. So could I please ask that there is a check made as to either why that route planning software now needs to be updated yet again without us necessarily seeming to have received the benefit in improved routes that was intended when that investment was made, or whether this is a duplication of something that's already been asked for. And the other point I want to make is about the resurfacing, the 5 million for resurfacing and the 5 million for highways infrastructure investments. Historically, and I mentioned this in Cabinet yesterday, previous administrations have made significant investments in the capital programme, borrowed in order to additionally invest in the road network, both in terms of maintenance, which shouldn't really be part of the capital programme, and also for new junction layouts and improved sort of safety schemes. Those investments have not stood the test of time. The work that has been done has degraded over a shorter period of time than the money was borrowed. So Herefordshire's residents are still paying back that money borrowed when those schemes are needing to be replaced, upgraded, updated. Can I please have assurance that we are not going to be borrowing money for these sorts of schemes over longer time frames than the work that is going to be undertaken is going to be in effect?
So first of all, the Yaser Brook, and I'll refer you to the business cases, the outline business cases which are Appendix E. But Yaser Brook is an approach to resolve a long-standing, would you class it as an error, I think? A piece of work that has not been done correctly. So we pay them, or we have an ongoing payment, I think it's £32,000 per year, and it's been going on for, I think, 10 years. What this wishes to do is to resolve that issue finally and get that off of our revenue costs. It comes out of revenue. That's the first one. The other one is the software. I refer back to software moves an exceptional case, and therefore what I'm saying is I'm not sure when it was purchased in your administration, but we have received this request, and therefore 50k to actually provide a significant saving on exponentially increasing send is very important. The other one, the resurfacing highways and infrastructure investment. The point there is that the money that is coming through, which I think everyone around here and certainly the residents that we speak to are very pleased with what we've achieved this year, and we'll therefore look to redo it next year. And it has to be longer than 7 years, I think, Rachel, the life? 7 years, I think. So rest assured that this work will last longer. Even surface dressing lasts longer than 7 years. Thank you.
Well, we're not borrowing over 40-year timescales, though, are we?
So when we borrow over 40 years, and the assets are depreciated in the accounts over the estimated useful life relevant to the individual asset, and that's subject to review by external audit, and we receive significant challenge over those useful lives because they are a key area of estimation, and we're explicit about those, and that information goes separately, our accounting estimates and judgments, to Audit and Governance Committee each year for review. So there is transparency and review of those. If I can just refer to your earlier question and challenge about the planning software, the route planning software, you're absolutely right that the previous administration did purchase a new piece of software that's due to be reprocured in the 25-26 financial year. A review has been carried out to determine what we need from that software, along with a consideration of a new pricing strategy that has been put to us by that supplier, and this represents an additional amount to procure a new, better, fit-for-purpose piece of software that is aligned to the work that we are looking at as part of the transport review within Rosie's area.
Okay, I think it might be time to turn our attention to one big item in the capital programme, which is now labelled as Western Bypass Phase 1. I don't know if anyone else has questions on this topic, but I will kick off by asking Councillor Price, based on the capital programme, council taxpayers are going to be paying £1.5 million a year for 40 years to fund that programme. How should we understand how that provides value for money? That's on current figures, that's a little more than a penny on council tax. And what will we get for that money?
I think you are back to, thank you for the question, Chairman. I think we're back to the outline business case as it will develop coming forward in this year. As time has gone by, and time has been very relevant to this project, as you all know, you can go back to most of our younger days, you start to see that the circumstances change because things haven't been done, and the circumstances that have arrived in the last period of time is actually going to take the need for this project to go forward at a much greater speed than it has done at any time in the past. If we look at it today, with the demand from the mandatory housing requirement, where they're going to go, and the economic corridor that's got to come to support that housing, then we're going to find that the infrastructure becomes very important. Now, as I believe that we have a business case in the making for the standalone bypass without, as it stands today, what is going to be the requirement going forward is added importance. We just cannot. So the first thing that I said at a cabinet meeting when we heard that the housing numbers was increasing from 16,000 to 27,500 was we cannot build those houses without the infrastructure to support it. And the bypass was not the first thing I mentioned under infrastructure. It was hospitals, doctors, pharmacies, and all of the other stuff that comes along. Now, we are mandated to build these houses. We don't know where they're going to go yet, but the thought process is for the economic corridor to be around Hereford, because Hereford is the place where the majority of the services are for this number of houses. So in the context of, is it value for money? The value for money will come from the development that will come on the back of the infrastructure is invested to allow that process to happen. It just happens to have fallen into place now, but I believe that the residents of this county actually expect it to be built, and the Western Bypass, to service the conditions of today, not what the conditions are for tomorrow.
What you're saying seems to be talking about value for money for the entire bypass, but the thing in the capital programme is only phase 1. So does phase 1 provide value on its own, or does it provide value because it enables...
come on, guys, you cannot build a bypass without phase 1 and phase 2. You know, you've got to start somewhere. And we are starting with phase 1 funded from this council. We are looking for finance for a significant sum of this route. But at this moment in time, we have to start somewhere, and this council will be funding phase 1.
Any further questions on Councillor Stark?
I was trying to look through the business case in Appendix E, Councillor Price. I understand we won't have a business case that conforms with the Green Book until July, is that right? Can you confirm that?
We have a date process for the whole project from December last year till April 26, if you want to hear
That conforms with the Green Book, does it?
It will.
I'm just trying to find out what you're asking the council to approve when it comes to the capital programme in February. Would that be all? Would that be all the evidence we will have?
Let me go through the list of timescales,
Right.
and then you'll get a better understanding. So, starting in December, just gone 24, we entered into a contract with ACOM. A confirmation of the funding strategy for the SLR to determine form of business case required. We're still in December, start the revised traffic modelling. January, which we're now currently in, is the land access agreements granted. March 25, begin the environmental surveys. This is to redo the work that was done prior to the cancellation of it 5 years ago. We've got April 25, the land acquirement options secured. That's progressing well, I might add. May 25, phase 1 review completed. June 25, start of procurement process for the contract delivery. January 26, the completion of environmental surveys. January 26, procurement of design and build contractor complete. March 26, amendment submitted to LPA and other documents as necessary if S73 is required. And April 26, the strategic case for entire bypass submitted.
So just to
clarify, there's one or two more as it's going to be quite a big project for you to
I think we've got the picture.
With the phase 1 construction starting in December 26, so there's a number of things to get to that point.
To clarify, Councillor Price, can you assure us that the 40 million that's in the capital programme will not actually have to be revised by that time?
It's an indicative figure. I mean, you know as well as I do what's happened. When we last looked at this, when I was working on it previously, I think we were looking at about £18 million. It's now 40 million. So you take your choice. If you want to hold it up, it'll cost more. And then it's just
I'm just asking what the risk is. That's all in terms of.
It's an indicative figure, and until we have got contractors in place, knowing what they're going to build exactly, and all of the work done, then we will have what we would expect to see a tendered price from a contractor.
And what time will that be, you think?
We, the start of the work is in December 26, so we will expect to have had the full tenders in during the summer of 26.
Okay, thank you.
Is there an upper limit to the cost where it ceases to be value for money?
We haven't discussed whether there's an upper or lower limit. We have put an indicative figure to get to the full business case. That do not take that to mean anything. You have to understand that at this stage you have an indicative figure that has been produced by the Green Book exercise that we're entering into, using industry standards to produce a price, and that is the indicative price that we have at this present moment for the timescale that we're looking at.
I have Councillor O'Driscoll and then Councillor Harvey.
Just really quickly, Councillor Price, you've obviously been close to this project than many people around this table, and I appreciate that you generally see it as value to the county. But I think it is a good question, just to pick up on what Councillor Proctor said there. In your personal opinion, is there a price at which, a cost point at which you would say this would be too much for the county, in that for every 30 million is effectively 60 million to the county over the term of the loan? If it was going to cost 50 million, we're talking 100 million. Is there a point at which you'd say, well, hang on a second, I don't think that's good value?
Yes, but you would have to look at it in the context of the whole subject. So if when I was stood outside a cottage on the B4352 in my ward west of Hereford, that had just flooded for the first time in 100 years because the water that was coming out onto the road was being driven into their house by lorries that should not be on that road, who were trying to go from the north west of the county to the southeast of the county, they actually asked me the question, why are all these lorries coming along this road causing me all this problem? And it is because they are trying to avoid having to cross the River Wye at Hereford. Now, if those of you who do know, we are short of bridges across the River Wye and the infrastructure to support those crossings, and the ones to the west of Hereford are dire, and the road network is short. So if I personally had to say, is it value for money, I would be looking for far more than just the value. And I will give you an example, personal example. We had a fire in March this year at the farm. We burnt down a building, and I've had to replace it. If somebody had told me 6 months ago that building, which I would have expected about 40,000 quid to have cost 125,000 quid, I would have said, actually, I've got to consider my whole farming process. But I've got to replace that building because it is part and parcel of the infrastructure of my business. So the cost I had to pay, fortunately I'm well insured, is significantly more than I'd expected. And I wouldn't have said no if it was £150,000. But in the context of what you're saying, there is always an upper limit to which you will say no. But if you say no, you have to say, what's the alternative?
I agree, but the alternative is, how could that money be spent elsewhere and on what it could be spent on? I'm just curious to know, in your own head, if we're sitting here in 12 months' time and all of a sudden you're saying it's going to be 100 million for the Southern Link Road,
Yep. I understand the question fully, but you have to ask, you want to spend it somewhere else. Do you want to spend it to resolve that problem? Because that problem is not going to go away. The problem of a river crossing in Hereford is absolutely fundamental to everything for the future of this county in the terms of transport. Whether you're busing or cycling or walking or anything else, it doesn't matter how you use it. You have to maintain and build and accept that we have to cross that river. And I believe that I was surprised when the cancellation of this project was back in 2021, and what the cost of it now is to reinvigorate it. The cost increase is enormous. If we did it another 10 years and it went another 10 years, your £100 million would be quite likely. But at some point, you have to make a decision. Is this the right thing for the economy of Hereford? Is it the right thing for the residents of Hereford? And more people are saying, yes, it is.
Okay. Councillor Harvey?
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Councillor Price, for the explanations that you've been providing. I think they are quite helpful. I mean, you do actually have a strategic outline business case for an Eastern River crossing, which has already been bought and paid for, if river crossings are what you're looking for. It's interesting that you say that the cost of this road has gone up astronomically, because that isn't visible in the figure for the line that you're wanting to insert in the capital programme here. The Southern Link Road was supposed to cost around 27 million, and we've got 30 in here, and okay, there's already 10 that you've started to spend out of our cash reserves on the matter, but it cost more than 42 million to deliver 800 yards of tarmac through the city centre. It's the most expensive piece of tarmac in Europe, the City Link Road. And I don't think anybody is finding the figures that are being presented here for the Southern Link Road as likely to be credible in terms of the actual cost. So if you have more realistic astronomical figures that that back up what you've been saying, perhaps those are the figures that need to be being submitted to the capital programme now. And indeed, if, as you say, you've got a timeline for developing a business case for the entire bypass, that is not in the capital programme and should not be being worked on because it has not been given approval for development, as far as I'm aware. The funding has been provided to progress the business case for the Southern Link Road, which Department of Transport has always insisted must be a standalone road project and be justified in value for money and all sorts of other terms on that basis. So I'm a little bit confused by what you've said here in the room today as to what it is exactly that 10 million plus this 30 million is actually going to be being spent on. It seems like it's going to be being spent a little bit on developing the case for the Western Relief Road in addition to the Southern Link Road. But I think maybe your administration needs to provide clarification on that ahead of these the business case in the state that it is goes to full council.
Can we, is it possible to have any clarity on what is the money to be spent on?
The 10 million that was put in is to give us each of the things that are read out to you. That was why it was important to read out to you the timelines. These have to be met and these cost money to get to those points. But a considerable amount of the work is redoing and re-establishing under the new regulations for road building exactly what was being built or planned to be built the first time round. That's why the environmental surveys have to be redone. The new road requirements, the LT 120 regulations, how we integrate that with what we're already building. As part of your previous administration, those left funding contracts that we are now delivering, which is part of this year's delivery on capital. The 30 million that is in there, along with the 10 million, is an indicative amount that this project is going to cost. I mean, that's what it says. And until we have a contractor that's coming in and says this is, as a result of the procurement exercise, we have a figure to work on, it's like every other project. We won't have the actual figure until we've gone to tender.
Okay.
The indicative figure is provided by the industry standards for road building. And I do take challenge about the Southern Relief Road being the most expensive piece of tarmac in Europe.
Okay, we note the opinions on both sides there. Councillor Hitchner, and then maybe this will be the last point on the bypass, link road, whatever we're calling it.
Thank you, Councillor Price. I'm just interested in the cost that's in the budget. I think, is it 1.5 million per annum? Does that include the repayment? So I've been asked by parish council to let them know what the effect it will be on the budget of spending this 40 million. Obviously, it will require savings elsewhere because it will be a revenue item. Is it 1.5 million in total, or is there a separate item which is in effect repayment of the capital? That's the sort of first general question. I don't think I need to declare an interest having a house within half a mile of the end of the SLR, but I will do so just for the avoidance of any future potential criticisms. I just my observation on your comments about the road and a little bit of the context of Councillor Cornthwaite. He was asking whether we have the money to complete it. Of course, we don't have the money to complete the bypass. We're looking at ourselves to borrow money or to provide for the Southern Relief Road, but for the balance of it, as far as I know, at the moment we do not have the money. So if you are assuming you're putting a business case for this road, assuming that there will be a bridge built and room for housing the north of the river, that just is not the case, because you do not have the money available. So to Councillor Cornthwaite's question about do you have the money to complete it, can you finish the project, you may be able to finish the Southern Relief Road, but I think there are huge question marks over the rest of it because the cost is going to be huge. So 2 questions there. Thank you.
So I will come back to Rachel and Councillor Storrett for an answer to the 1.5 million. But this idea of funding, if you've ever been involved with trying to get funding out of government, there is a process through which you have to go through it. And that process determines that you have to have a full business case to be able to get into the queue for funding. If I was to go back to 2017, there was a program called RIS1 and RIS2 then for the road improvement strategy for national highways. And I met with the chief executive of, I'm not sure whether they were National Highways or Highways England at that point in time, but there was 189 projects in the queue for funding in RIS1 and RIS2, some of which were progressing, some of which weren't, some of which had gone too expensive, etc. And when I asked the chief executive, where would Hereford bypass be if once we got the full business case into it? He said, you won't come in to at 190. You will come in on the date of which you can give us that business case and know that you can deliver it. So the fact that there might have been 190 cases, 100 of those cases still haven't been built and have been binned long before they got to the point of funding. You never know where you're going to come in. And that's still the case today. When the government of the day, and it's a different government today, decided they're going to announce for infrastructure funding, they will want the full business case. You have to fund that to that point before you can even get into the system. The funding for the Western bypass, which you're asking, which is different from phase 1, is that when you have the full business case, there is a requirement from government to look at your bid for funding and what benefits it will accrue to them. Now, as I mentioned before, which is different from what it was 5 years ago and it is different from a year ago, is that the government are saying, you in Herefordshire will do this, which is build houses and have employment land, and we need the infrastructure. The question about funding will be, when we have the full business case, will we have a good argument to go to government and say, if you want us to build houses, we have to have the funding for that road. It is no good going on saying you can't plan for something because you don't have the money today, because the business case has to be made for you to attract the funding. I am not asking this council to pay £200-300 million for a Western bypass. I'm saying we have to get the full business case, of which we are working on, and we've got the funding to do it at this moment in time to get to that business case to then go and ask for the funding. I will refer to Rachel for the 1.5 million cost as to how she's apportioned that.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. So the revenue impact of any borrowing represents the interest and the minimum revenue provision MRP, which we're required to prudently make provision for in the revenue budget. So in 25-26, there is no impact on the revenue budget for the borrowing based on the estimated profile of that borrowing. And we provided this detail in a response to a public question yesterday, so it was published as part of the Cabinet Papers. In 26-27, there'll be a revenue impact of 0.25 million, assuming borrowing of 5 million in 25-26. In 27-28, there'll be a total revenue impact of £1 million, assuming that 5 million in 25-26, and further borrowing of 15 million in 26-27. In 28-29 and years thereafter, there'll be a revenue impact of 1.5 million, assuming that 5 million in 25-26, 15 in 26-27, and 10 million in 27-28. And that impact has been built into the medium-term financial plan.
Okay. Does
Which,
anyone want?
Joe, which equates to probably about 0.75% of our revenue budget.
Or 1% on council tax. Has anyone got any other specific capital, very quickly, because we are hurtling towards the end of the meeting? Councillor Fake.
It is very quick. It's just what does that do to our borrowing capacity for the future? I'd just like to know, for example, if we decide that we actually want to borrow more money for housing, social housing, which is one of the very real crises facing us, does it reduce our ability to borrow because we've borrowed this amount of money?
So any borrowing would be considered in context of the council's overall borrowing position and its asset base as part of our financial assessment of the risk to the council's financial resilience. There's no upward limit, there's no magic number. We'd consider that in that context. We're a very lowly borrowed council at the moment, and that means that our external borrowing as a proportion of the top half of our balance sheet, which is represented by the council's assets, is relatively low, and that means that we are in a position to take on more borrowing if we need to without it putting our financial position at risk. The risk lies in the revenue impact, so what we need to consider as part of budget setting each year is the impact of any borrowing, both in the year of that budget and over the term of the borrowing, and that's why we consider it as part of that medium-term financial plan and beyond.
Councillor Davis?
Can I just clarify then that if the Southern Link Road was put in place at whatever cost, then we would benefit potentially from increased revenue from businesses that then would be using that Southern Link Road to go into Rotherham and other areas?
That's factually correct. So any increase in housing in the county brings additional Band D council tax income, and similarly any new businesses that are established as a result of improvements in infrastructure bring new business rates income to the county.
In addition, you would then have the benefits to the residents, that approximately 15% of traffic coming in to Hereford from the south goes round the Asda roundabout, up the 465 and down to 49, and therefore that 15% traffic will be removed with potential health benefits as well as enhancements to those residents in the Belmont area.
Very quickly.
Very quickly, it's just that there is still an elephant in the room at Rotherham, and that is the River Wye, and there is no way to cross the River Wye. So you're still relocating. We're spending a lot of money relocating traffic to Rotherham that has no way of accessing. So I would just ask you, is there any plan within a future capital programme to progress some sort of parkway rail line that links Rotherham up with Hereford, which has been discussed at some point, but
not at the minute. But what I'm addressing is, so the traffic, 15% of the traffic that goes into Hereford from the south is basically going from the Abergavenny Road to Rotherham. And what we're saying is, with the phase 1 of the bypass, that traffic wouldn't come into Hereford to go around the roundabout, to go down to 49 and then down towards Rotherham. That way, it would actually not go further than turning right and heading across into Rotherham. And that will have benefits to the residents and also to health and many other things.
On that subject of rail crossing, because I mean, unless you're informed, you don't know. So I'm telling you, I met with Network Rail this very morning, and we had a very interesting conversation about, if you remember last year, we were talking about HS2 cancellation, giving Network North a significant sum of money that would be given to Herefordshire Council as the southernmost county of Network North. it was going to be some £100 million, of which we'd be able to spend on transport. That's not now coming forward. But the issue about trains in and around Hereford, which is the Golden Valley Parkway, which is on our lips about being developed, and that has to be developed as a plan with Network Rail. Transport for Wales is also trying to increase the regularity of trains from Cardiff to Manchester along this line on an hourly basis with 5 carriages, which is going to give the difficulty to Network Rail to be able to enhance that network anywhere along that line a problem for any other stopping capability. So when we start, that's introducing a completely different subject. But we're onto this, and we're working with people as to how we can best move people to and from places. The issue is, if we are going to get funding for a bypass, we have to satisfy the funders at government level, and they will only be interested if we are resolving the issue of the A49 going through the centre of Hereford, which we want to get out anyway for additional ability to use that road space in the city, but we won't get funding to go east through the normal channels of funding that would be offered to us for infrastructure. So if you want to go to Rotherham and pop over the river there, that will be a future project that we will have to look at in the future to fund for ourselves, because it does not marry up the A49. And that's where the difficulty arises. If we want funding, we have to meet what the criteria is for them to offer us that funding. And it has always been, you sort out the A49, then we'll offer money.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to disappoint Councillor Harvey, I'm afraid. I know she wants to come in, but I just want to spend a few minutes looking at the relationship between strategy and budget. And so I'm going to try and bring in the capital strategy and MTFS and anything else we can shoehorn in these last few minutes. And I'll kind of kick off with where I'm coming from. I found it difficult to see the join between the capital and revenue budgets and the council plan, despite occasional assurances that everything was built to be in line with the council plan. I think part of that is that we don't have a delivery plan for this year, but part of it is also that the capital strategy, and Councillor Harvey may weigh in on this as well. The capital strategy doesn't feel very strategic. It feels like essentially how we're going to deliver the capital projects that we have, rather than how we will be planning to use capital over the coming years to deliver corporate plan priorities. So I'm going to kick off with what that's what is your response to that, and then I'll open the field to the rest of the committee. I mean, I do think that's it's a strategic cabinet question, not really a. I was looking at Councillor Stoddart to answer, really.
Thank you, Chair. Well, it's subjective. We obviously feel that this is the strategy. It's giving you a 5-year outlook. It delivers what we believe is where we see priorities, etc., etc. But as we've said all the way through, we're happy to take comments and criticism. And we'll review and look at how we can. We're not going to rewrite the whole strategy between now and the 23rd of January, but what we will do is we will take your comments on board, and when we come through for next year, we may look at redoing it.
We do have a task and finish on the delivery plan, so maybe we can pick up some of these discussions as part of that. Any Councillor Harvey, if you want to speak on this, perhaps if you want to ask any questions about how children and young people's needs have been reflected, raise your hand now. Okay, just Councillor Harvey.
Thank you. A couple of points. I'd like to support the Chairman's comments in terms of the capital strategy document actually being more of a delivery plan for the existing programme, and if it were a strategy, it would actually be including the kind of things that we need to develop for the future that aren't currently in the plan, and what your plan is for how you build those business cases and you know, sort of project plans into the actual activity over the next 4 or 5 years in order to populate the plan in the out years with the programmes that we don't yet have in there. That's my view of a strategy. I've got concerns about the in terms of taking a strategic view of the budget, of the statement that you made in your introduction, Councillor Stoddart, about using the flexibility because the funding isn't ring-fenced of the 3.4 million for from government funding the council's preparatory work to handle additional recycling waste streams, to fold that into the general sort of revenue budget and spend it on things and stuff. I think, you know, from a Scrutiny Management Board point of view, I have concerns that that has been provided to us as a local authority by government to do a very particular thing, to do some preparatory and planning work preparation to be able to handle recycling material streams that we currently don't have the capacity to handle. Now, I know that we're going to be going through the procurement process for a new waste contract, and that's big doings in and of itself, to be asked to handle additional recycling material streams on top of that, and to choose to use the money in year to do something else, when we don't know whether that is going to be money that continues or whether that's one-off funding. I consider that to be risky, and as a minimum I would like to see it made explicit where that money is going and what it's doing elsewhere in the budget that you have planned, and that it doesn't just disappear into the general revenue pot. I want some clear indication of where that 3.4 million is going, so that we can take a view on whether or not that's a good thing to be spending the money on compared to doing what government intended us to do with it, whether or not they have ring-fenced the money or given us the flexibility to do something else. I'm sure they expect each and every council to be at a different point in its planning process for handling future waste streams, and maybe that's why they haven't been rigorous in terms of ring-fencing it. But I'd also like to know exactly where we are in our planning for handling the additional waste streams, and would be looking to the relevant scrutiny committee to be picking that up as a serious topic for investigation, to acquire some assurance that we aren't being foolish in taking a short-term view of how we use that money. And I've also we're going to come on to Treasury Management later, are we? After this.
We might be running out of time for Treasury Management.
Okay, well, I think in that case I'll just make the point again that we are not, in the way that this budget is being constructed, properly reflecting the reality of the income that we are going to be getting in the coming year from interest payments on our investments. We are under-egging that, and I can understand that that might be something that we want to do, to have some money trickle in year for us to hold in our back pocket. But, as has already been stated, a contingency of over £11 million has been created as a consequence of moving things around in the reserves. And, you know, where I feel, given the financial conditions, it would be more appropriate for us to be properly recognising and reflecting that that income is expected, whether we decide to put it to one side overtly and hold it as a risk reserve or whatever. I think just to pretend that it isn't going to happen is not appropriate, and we should be recognising it. The previous administration did recognise that that money was going to be coming in and made it clear to Scrutiny Management Board and to the Budget Council meeting that we were going to be using that to target support for hard-up households and give officers the discretion to use that funding as they felt appropriate. And that was over £1.7 million of targeted support that we could be using, and we're not.
Okay, and this, so just on that latter point, this committee agrees, and we have made a recommendation, and I'm sure that the executive will respond, responding to those points. Happy for you to make some initial points now, but I'm aware that we have made a recommendation, so we'll get a formal response back. If you want to pick up the other points as well, as pithily as possible.
Okay, timer on. Just to provide some extra explanation around the extended producer responsibility additional income that we've received this year. This is income collected by central government intended to incentivise manufacturers of food packaging to reduce the amount of packaging they use in their products. Central government have recognised that the burden of collecting this additional waste and disposing of that waste falls on local authorities, and so for 25-26 it's a one-year settlement, and this is a one-year grant so far. We've been awarded £3.538 million, and Cabinet have considered the expenditure requirement, how are we meeting our responsibilities to collect, to recycle as part of our waste activity, and it has been determined that this is additional money in year because we are already meeting those responsibilities. In terms of aligning that specific income to a specific area of expenditure, we don't do that generally in that element of funding that you see in the budget, our council tax business rates. It doesn't go directly to any source of expenditure. What I can provide assurance of is that we have a budget to sufficiently support the activity that we need to in waste in terms of collection and disposal and meet our obligations. And so this has been determined as additional income this year. It's not ring-fenced, and there are no expected requirements on us over and above what we are already doing.
Councillor Stoddart, this could be the last thing that you say in this meeting, so make it count and be pithy.
And pithy. So first of all, strategy, as I recall back on my MBA with a module called strategy, is subjective. And effectively, I remember my tutor saying, a strategy is what do you want to be when you grow up? So whilst I take your comments on board that you may disagree with how it looks, I do believe it is a strategy, because it does actually say what we want to do. It is not a delivery plan, it is a strategy, but we may take a difference of opinion on how good a strategy is. And as I've said before, we will work with you and take your comments on board and look to take it forward. I would also then pick up on Councillor Harvey's comments. On the one hand, she's telling us we're too risk averse, and on the other hand, she's saying we're not taking enough risk. So yeah, there's a dichotomy there. What we try to do each time is to balance things and take a measured approach to everything that we do.
Okay. There's an opportunity now to look at any recommendations we might want to make. Hopefully, any recommendations have been sent, possible recommendations have been sent to Daniel. Mm-hmm. Will you put them up on the screen?
I will do. Bear with me a moment, please.
Is that how we do things as a new member of the committee?
It has been, yes. How? I'm sorry if that was unclear. I mean, my view is that the first bullet point is something that we can put onto our work programme. We don't need to make a recommendation. We can just ask for that in due course.
My view is that it just reinforces the message to Cabinet, and this is a public meeting, And I just feel, as a Scrutiny Management Board, if we are silent in our recommendations on the 20% uplift of the biggest part of the revenue budget, then I just feel that we are missing an opportunity. So I would support the recommendation since it came from me. I would say that, wouldn't I? But it's up to you to vote it in or not.
I'm not sure I understand. Can someone explain to me the second recommendation? I think that was Councillor Hitchner.
Yes, right here. It was a qualification of the first recommendation. So the first recommendation, I guess, assumes that we can mitigate, and so it will reduce the costs. Whereas if you look at the research, it's showing a huge demand in the adult cost. We might be able to halt that decline, that growth a little bit, but I would doubt that we would be able to mitigate it completely. So I just thought that we should look at this in the context not just of mitigating future budget pressures, but also in the broader picture of what does a picture look like over the next 4 or 5 years of the cost of adult social care, which are huge.
That, Councillor Harvey?
Yeah, well, I think in debate I recommended that the capital programme, the profiling of the capital programme be revisited by Cabinet to test its deliverability. And the last few comments that I made about the a more accurate representation of the income we are going to receive from interest be reflected in the budget rather than the £555,000 that's in there at the moment.
So we have already made that recommendation.
Yes, but we haven't made it in the context of this budget scrutiny.
Okay, I mean, I suppose if we, it would make sense to make it now. I'm conscious of time. Could I just take a quick vote on extending the meeting by 10 minutes, please? All those in favour? Any against? Okay.
Following Councillor Hitchner's comments that the recommendation he suggested was in fact a qualifier on the first recommendation, I've just embellished the first recommendation to take that into account. Might suggest therefore that we delete that second point, it being incorporated if Councillor Hitchner agrees to that. Okay, we'll do.
And I personally support Councillor Harvey's recommendation that the capital programme be profiled over several years to be more, still ambitious but more realistic.
Be profiled to
over several years to be ambitious but more realistic. I would think that's. Yeah. Okay. Over the lifetime of the programme instead of several years. Sorry to make you type in front of everybody here.
It's okay.
And then the final one, I guess, to reiterate the committee's recommendation that a more realistic estimate of interest through the Treasury management be included in the budget.
You have to restate that, I'm afraid. That's.
Can I just type?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
You've been deserted.
Ed?
I do think there is something around the capital strategy, making it more meaningful and making it relate more to possibly the council plan.
I agree. I don't think it's realistic to put it in recommendation because they are not going to change that before.
Okay.
I mean, we can, but I think realistically we can make some Councillor Stoddart invited us to work with them on that.
Okay. Excuse me.
So
I'm not sure what our recommendations exactly. I mean, this is whether it's something that should be that this is an observation on this particular budget, and that it was something that we think they should bear in mind for in preparing next year's budget. That there is that they pay more attention, making it a more meaningful capital strategy that takes more.
That seems like a reasonable recommendation. But yes, so you've persuaded me, Councillor Harvey.
At the budget scrutiny meeting for the Scrutiny Management Board last year, we were given assurance that the delivery plan would come alongside the budget to the full to the budget setting council meetings, so that it could be seen as being both funded and in the context of the budget and the MTFS. That hasn't happened again this year. It didn't happen last year because of timing issues to do with the development of the plan, but there's really no excuse for it not having happened this year. And I think although we may not get it for the budget setting meeting, I think recognising that it was a recommendation that the Scrutiny Management Board made last year and restating that is, I think, important. Chair, do we note in the minutes that we have requested clarification on the changes that have been made in base budgets in preparation for this, and that's information that will be being provided in advance of any budget being sent to Cabinet and onto full council?
Yes, I'm sure we will note that, and I'll talk to Simon to make sure that is followed up. Okay, are we content with these recommendations? Can I take them on block? All those in favour? Then our meeting is at a close. Thank you all for your full contributions. Our next formal meeting is on the 11th of March. We do have a session in February on the delivery plan.
We also have a work programming meeting next week.
And we have a work programme meeting next week, and we've talked about some things that might go on the work programme, so that's a good start. Thank you very much.